He'd survived scandals, betrayals, even enemies who wanted him dead. But nothing prepared the billionaire for this. A waitress calling him dad. Was it a mistake? Or the truth he's been running from his entire life? The clinking of glasses and hum of laughter filled the dimly lit rooftop restaurant, where the skyline of New York glittered like a sea of diamonds. At a corner table, alone, sat Alexander Veron, a man whose name was etched into skyscrapers, magazines, and financial headlines. To the world, he was untouchable, a billionaire with empires stretching across continents. But tonight, his eyes carried a weariness no one could buy their way out of. The waitress approached his table with steady steps, her notepad clutched a little too tightly. She was young, early 20s perhaps, with kind but sharp eyes, the kind that seemed to study him, not just serve him. She set down his glass of water, her lips trembling before she spoke. "Here you go, sir," she said softly. Then, as though the words escaped her against her will, she whispered, "Dad." Alexander froze. "Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now back to the story. The glass in his hand hovered mid-air, the world around him blurring. His chest tightened as though someone had ripped open a door he had bolted shut decades ago. He blinked at her, stunned, every muscle in his body rigid. What did you just say?" His voice was sharper than he intended, laced with disbelief. The waitress's face drained of color, but her eyes remained locked on his. "I said that your face, your eyes, you look exactly like him." The room seemed to tilt. Memories he had buried under years of deals, power, and solitude slammed into him all at once. A woman's laughter, a photograph he had once destroyed, the haunting question he had never dared answer. Alexander's heart pounded as his carefully constructed empire of control threatened to crumble in front of a stranger, or perhaps not a stranger at all. Who was this young woman? And why did the sound of her voice feel like a key turning in a lock he had hidden even from himself? For the first time in years, Alexander Veron was not in control, and it terrified him. If someone you barely knew suddenly called you by the name of a parent you'd lost, or thought you'd never meet, how would you react? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to see how you'd handle a moment like this. The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. The young waitress, her name tag read Lila, shifted awkwardly, as though she regretted the slip, but the words were already out, and Alexander could not unhear them. He swallowed, forcing his composure. He had faced hostile boards, government hearings, and billion-dollar losses with less trembling in his hands. But this? A stranger's whisper that carried the weight of a ghost? "I'm sorry," Lila stammered, shaking her head. "I don't know why I said that. It's just you look so much like him. My father." Alexander leaned back in his chair, hiding the storm inside him. Her father. He'd spent decades running from the shadow of that title. A word he had never earned. A word that still cut through him like glass. Before he could answer, the restaurant manager appeared, smiling too widely. "Mr. Veron, is everything all right?" Alexander forced a cold smile, the mask he wore for the world snapping back into place. "Fine," he said. "Just a mistake." But it wasn't fine. Not even close. That night, long after he had left the rooftop restaurant, Alexander sat in his penthouse, surrounded by walls of glass overlooking the glittering city. Yet, for all the luxury, the place felt unbearably empty. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid trembling in his hand. He had built his empire on discipline, rules that kept his heart locked away. No attachments, no distractions, no past. But the girl's voice had cracked something open. That he hadn't heard that word directed at him since her since the woman who had vanished from his life with more secrets than he could count. Her name haunted him even now, Isabella. They had met when he was much younger, before wealth had hardened him. She had been fire and light, a woman who challenged his arrogance, who called him out when the rest of the world bowed. For a brief moment he had believed in love, believed in something beyond money and power. But Isabella had disappeared, leaving behind only a broken photograph and a hollow space inside him. And now, years later, a girl with her eyes had called him Dad. Meanwhile, Lila returned home to a small, worn apartment on the outskirts of Brooklyn. She dropped her bag by the door, her heart still pounding from the encounter. She had been wrong before, mistaking strangers for echoes of her father who had disappeared before she was even born. But tonight was different. The way he froze, the way his voice cracked when he repeated her words. She pulled out a shoebox from under her bed. Inside were faded letters her mother had kept hidden, a single torn photograph, and a necklace she never wore. She traced her fingers along the photo's edge, where the man's face had been ripped away. Her mother had died last year, never answering the questions that haunted Lila's childhood. Who was my father? Why did he leave? And now, could it really be him? Back in his penthouse, Alexander stared out at the city, a war raging inside him. He knew one thing for certain. The past he had buried was clawing its way back, and he was no longer sure he could stop it. His empire had weathered everything: lawsuits, betrayals, financial storms. But this wasn't about money. This was about blood, memory, and the one truth he had spent his life running from. And Alexander Veron had never been so afraid. Do you believe people can truly bury their past? Or does it always come back to the surface one way or another? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. The next morning, Alexander told himself it had been nothing. Just a strange coincidence. A slip of the tongue from a girl who missed her father. He buried himself in back-to-back meetings, contracts, and numbers. Anything to drown out the echo of that word. But the echo wouldn't leave. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Those eyes, filled with a recognition she couldn't have faked. By evening, when his assistant entered his office holding a small package, his composure cracked. "It was left downstairs for you, sir," she said, setting the box on his desk. There was no return address, just his name written in a rushed, almost desperate scrawl. Alexander hesitated before tearing it open. Inside lay an old leather diary, edges frayed and stained with time. His breath caught when he opened the first page. The handwriting was unmistakable. Isabella. His chest tightened as he read the first line. "For my daughter. If she ever seeks the truth, this will guide her." The words blurred as his pulse hammered. Daughter. Not theory. Not coincidence. Proof. Before he could process it further, his phone buzzed. Private number. He answered, his voice hoarse. "Yes." Quiet pause. Then, "It's me." He froze. The voice was shaky, familiar yet uncertain. "Lila?" She inhaled sharply on the other end. "I know it was you. My mother's diary said if I ever wanted answers, I'd find them in the city. And then, there you were. Why didn't you ever?" Her voice broke. Alexander's grip on the phone tightened. His empire had taught him to negotiate with kings, outwit rivals, and crush enemies. But there were no rules for this. "Where did you get the diary?" he asked quietly, almost pleading. "My mother left it hidden. She never told me about you, not really. Just shadows, half-truths. But if this is real..." Her tone cracked into anger now. "If you are my father, then why weren't you there?" The words stabbed through him. For the first time in years, Alexander had no answer. Later that night, Lila sat in a small cafe near the Brooklyn Bridge, the diary clutched in her hands. She hadn't meant to call him, but the anger had boiled over. He had sounded shaken, too shaken to be innocent. She turned the pages, her mother's voice whispering through every line. Meetings in secret, a love too complicated to explain, and warnings, always warnings. "If you're reading this, Lila, Know that I kept you away to protect you. They would have hurt you if they knew. Lila's hand trembled. They? Who was they? She didn't notice the tall man in a dark coat watching her from across the cafe, eyes fixed on the diary in her hands. Back in his penthouse, Alexander pored over the same diary, unable to stop reading. His past, the one he had convinced himself was buried, was now alive in his hands. Every secret Isabella had hidden seemed to spill from the fragile pages. But one entry chilled him to the core. Alex, if you ever find this, know that the enemy was closer than we thought. He's still out there, watching. Alexander slammed the book shut, his heart pounding. Isabella hadn't left him for no reason. She had left because someone dangerous had been watching them. And if Lila had the diary too, then she was in danger. If you suddenly discovered hidden letters or diaries from a parent that revealed secrets about your family, would you read them all? Even if you weren't ready for the truth? Tell me in the comments, I want to know how brave you'd be. The city had never felt so restless. Every honk of a taxi, every flickering streetlight seemed to pulse with unseen eyes. Alexander couldn't shake the words from Isabella's diary. The enemy was closer than we thought. He's still out there, watching. For a man who built his empire on logic and power, it was unnerving to realize there was a chapter of his life he could not control. 2 days later, Alexander called for Lila. She was reluctant, suspicious, but curiosity and anger drove her to meet him. The meeting spot he chose was uncharacteristic, an old bookshop tucked between crumbling buildings in the East Village. Lila entered cautiously, her arms crossed. She looked small in the dim light, but her eyes, so much like Isabella's, burned with defiance. You asked me to come, she said flatly. So talk. Alexander, dressed down for once in a dark coat and scarf, studied her. She was so young, too young to be carrying the weight of unanswered questions. That diary you found, I've been reading mine too. Your mother left them for both of us. Lila frowned. Why now? Why not years ago? Why didn't you fight for me? The words hit harder than any business rival's attack. Alexander's throat tightened, but he forced himself to speak the truth, or as much as he could bear. Because your mother begged me not to. She told me keeping my distance was the only way to keep you safe. I thought she was protecting you from me, from the mistakes I'd made. But now I think it was something more. Lila clutched her diary tighter. She wrote about someone, a man who was always watching. I don't know who he was, but if you knew, you should have told me. Alexander shook his head. I didn't know. Not then. But now. He lowered his voice, leaning closer. I think whoever that man was, he hasn't stopped. And if he knows you have the diary, you're in danger. Later that evening, Lila sat alone in her apartment, replaying his words. She wanted to hate him, this powerful man who could have changed her life, who had chosen silence instead. And yet, she couldn't ignore the flicker of truth in his eyes, the way his voice cracked when he spoke of her mother. She opened the diary again, scanning the pages, searching for something she might have missed. Halfway through, tucked between entries, she found a folded sheet of paper, one she hadn't noticed before. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. It was a letter, addressed to Alexander. Alex, if you are reading this, it means our secret is no longer safe. He is closer than ever. Trust no one, not even those in your circle. Our daughter's future depends on it. Hide the truth, even from her, until it's safe. Lila's breath caught. Trust no one. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text message from an unknown number. Stop digging. Some secrets aren't yours to uncover. Her stomach dropped. She rushed to call Alexander, but before she could press the button, a shadow passed by her window. Her heart raced. Meanwhile, Alexander sat in his penthouse, staring at the city below. He hadn't told Lila everything. There was one man he suspected, a man he had once called a partner, long before his fortune had soared. Someone who had vanished at the same time Isabella had. A name he hadn't spoken in years. Victor Kale. The mystery was no longer just about family. It was about survival. And Alexander knew, whether Lila trusted him or not, He had no choice but to protect her now. Have you ever had a moment where you weren't sure who to trust, even among people close to you? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading. The following day, Alexander had his driver take him to Brooklyn. He hadn't told his assistant, hadn't told his security team. This was a meeting he couldn't risk sharing with anyone. Lila had agreed to see him again, though reluctantly. They sat at a corner table in a quiet diner, the hum of the city muted by the clink of forks and coffee mugs around them. Lila pushed the diary across the table. "I found something," she said. Her voice was sharp, accusing. "A letter. To you. She said someone was after her. She said you had to hide the truth, even from me." Alexander opened the folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was Isabella's. The words cut through him like ice. "Trust no one. Not even those closest to you." He clenched his jaw. "Victor," he whispered without realizing. "Who's Victor?" Lila pressed. Alexander hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to stay silent. But her eyes, Isabella's eyes, would not let him lie. "He was my business partner, my friend, until he betrayed me, until he betrayed your mother. I thought he disappeared. But if he's still out there..." Before Lila could respond, the door to the diner opened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside. He wasn't young, but his presence was sharp, dangerous. His gaze swept the room before locking onto their table. Alexander froze. His pulse spiked. Victor Kale. Alive. Victor smiled faintly as if he'd been expecting this reunion for years. He walked over, each step deliberate, and stopped at their table. "Alex," he said smoothly, "it's been too long." His eyes shifted to Lila. "And you must be the girl. I can see Isabella in you." Lila stiffened. "You know my mother?" Victor's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "Know her? She trusted me with things she never trusted him with." He glanced at Alexander, whose jaw tightened with fury. Alexander's voice was low, dangerous. "What do you want, Victor?" Victor leaned closer, his words meant for them alone. "You think Isabella was protecting her from you. But the truth, Alex, is that she was protecting her from me. And now the game has changed." Lila's heart pounded as she looked between them. Two powerful men, two versions of the past, two truths clashing. Victor straightened his coat. "The diary belongs to me. Isabella left it for a reason, and it wasn't for you." His gaze cut back to Lila. "And if you care about your mother's legacy, you'll walk away from him before he destroys you too." With that, Victor turned and left, disappearing into the city like a shadow that had always been waiting. Lila sat frozen, the words clawing at her. Was he telling the truth? Did my mother trust him more than you? Alexander's throat tightened. For the first time in decades, he didn't know what to say. And Lila realized something chilling. Maybe she wasn't just here to uncover her father. Maybe she was here to uncover her mother's greatest lie. The balance had shifted. Trust was fractured. The past was no longer just painful, it was dangerous. And for Alexander and Lila, the question was no longer who left who. It was, who was Isabella really protecting? Rain pounded against the glass walls of Alexander's penthouse, streaking the city lights into blurred rivers of gold. He stood alone, staring into the storm, his reflection fractured in the glass. Victor's words replayed in his head like a poison. "She trusted me with things she never trusted you with." It was more than betrayal. It was a wound that cut deeper than fortune, deeper than empire. For years, Alexander had convinced himself Isabella left because of danger, because of forces beyond their control. But what if the truth was crueler? What if she had chosen Victor instead? Behind him, Lila paced restlessly. "You're not telling me everything," she accused, her voice sharp with anger. "You keep saying you wanted to protect me, but every time I ask a question, I get more secrets." Alexander turned, his face shadowed. "I'm telling you what I know." "No," she snapped, her fists clenched at her sides. "You're telling me what you want me to know." But Victor, he looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I felt like maybe he knew my mother better than you ever did. The words struck harder than she realized. Alexander staggered back a step, the weight of them nearly buckling him. "You don't understand," he said hoarsely. "I loved her. His voice cracked. He had never admitted that out loud, not even to himself. Lila shook her head. "Love isn't abandoning someone. Love isn't silence. Love isn't 20 years of pretending I didn't exist." Her words left the air heavy with pain. That night, while Alexander wrestled with ghosts in his penthouse, Lila returned to her apartment. She thought she might find clarity in solitude, but instead, she found terror waiting. Her door was ajar. Her breath caught. She knew she had locked it. Slowly, she stepped inside. The room was dark, silent, too silent. She reached for the light switch. The lamp flickered on, and her shoebox of letters, the only memories of her mother, was gone. On her kitchen table, in its place, sat a single slip of paper. "Stop searching, or next time, it won't just be the letters." Her stomach knotted. Fear pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. She rushed to call Alexander, but halfway through dialing, she froze. Could she even trust him? Or was he part of the game all along? Tears blurred her vision as she whispered to herself, "Who's lying to me? Who's the real enemy?" Hours later, Alexander found himself at his lowest point. The empire he had built felt meaningless, hollow against the truth unraveling in front of him. His daughter hated him, Victor had returned like a vulture, and Isabella was gone, leaving only riddles and ink. He sat on the floor of his glass fortress, the diary open before him. One page caught his eye, a page he hadn't noticed before. "Alex, if you love her, you must let her hate you. Only then will she be safe." His hands trembled, his vision blurred, and for the first time in decades, Alexander Veron, the man the world saw as unbreakable, collapsed in silence, broken by the weight of everything he had lost. The storm outside roared as if to mock him. For all his billions, all his power, Alexander was powerless now. And in the shadows of Brooklyn, Victor Kale was already moving his next piece across the board. The storm had broken by morning, leaving the city washed clean, as if New York itself had been reset. But inside Alexander's penthouse, the air was heavy with the remnants of a sleepless night. He hadn't moved from the floor. The diary still lay open before him, Isabella's words etched into his mind. "If you love her, you must let her hate you. Only then will she be safe." For hours, he had tortured himself with those lines. But now, in the gray dawn, something clicked. Isabella hadn't left because she stopped loving him. She left because she believed someone was watching. Someone who would use him and his power against their child. And that meant Victor wasn't just a bitter enemy. He was part of something larger. Alexander rose to his feet, resolve hardening. "She didn't leave me," he whispered. "She was protecting both of us." Across town, Lila sat in the ruins of her apartment, the note still trembling in her hands. "Stop searching, or next time it won't just be the letters." Tears streaked her face, but through the fear, something inside her shifted. For so long, she had been the girl without answers, the abandoned child, the one always left in the shadows. But not anymore. She opened the diary again, forcing herself to read even the most painful entries. Then, near the very end, she found something new, something she had overlooked. A list, names, dates, coded addresses, and one line scrawled hastily at the bottom. "If danger comes, find the vault. He will know where." Her breath caught. The vault. Her mother had hidden something, and she had meant for Alexander to lead her there. Lila wiped her tears, her hands steady now. Fear hadn't disappeared, but it no longer ruled her. "If my mother trusted you to lead me," she whispered, clutching the diary, "then I have no choice but to trust you too." That afternoon, Lila showed up at Alexander's penthouse unannounced. He opened the door, looking haggard, almost surprised she had come. "We need to talk," she said firmly, stepping inside before he could answer. She laid the diary on the table and pointed to the coded page. "The vault. She wanted me to find it, with you." Whatever's inside, it's the truth. And I'm not running anymore. Alexander studied the page, his chest tightening. The codes, the names, he remembered them. It was tied to a hidden account, an underground storage facility he had once set up with Isabella when they believed Victor was watching. He looked at Lila. For the first time since she had called him Dad, he saw not just anger in her eyes, but strength. His daughter's strength. Isabella's strength. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "We'll find the vault. And when we do, the truth ends this once and for all." For Lila, it was the first time she felt something unfamiliar when she looked at him. Not anger, not suspicion, but the fragile beginning of trust. And for Alexander, it was the first time he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, redemption was still possible. The darkness hadn't lifted, but now there was a crack, path forward, and both of them were ready to follow it. Together. Do you believe trust can be rebuilt once it's been shattered, or is it forever broken? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your perspective. The night was cold, the kind of biting chill that crept into your bones. Alexander and Lila stood before a steel door, hidden beneath an abandoned warehouse in Queens. Rusted chains hung from the walls, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the cavernous space. "This is it," Alexander said, his hand hovering over the keypad. "The vault." Lila clutched the diary tighter, her pulse racing. "What's inside?" Alexander shook his head. "I don't know. Only that Isabella insisted it was our safeguard. Our truth." He punched in the code, a series of numbers he hadn't thought about in decades. The heavy door groaned before sliding open, revealing a dimly lit room. Inside were boxes, files, and a single locked chest on a pedestal. Lila stepped forward, her voice trembling. "She wanted me to see this. Us to see this." Before Alexander could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. "Of course she did," came a familiar voice. Smooth, mocking, cold. They spun around. Victor Kale stepped from the shadows, his presence as sharp as a blade. Behind him, two men in dark suits fanned out, blocking the exit. Alexander's fists clenched. "You followed us." Victor smirked. "You always did underestimate me. You think Isabella left her secrets here for you? No, Alex. She left them because she knew I'd come for them. And now, thanks to your little family reunion, I finally have the key." His eyes slid to Lila. Her stomach dropped. "Me?" Victor stepped closer, his words slicing through the air. "You're the key, Lila. Isabella hid everything from Alex because she knew he'd ruin it, but you were her insurance. The one person she knew I couldn't reach. Until now." Alexander moved in front of her, his voice low and lethal. "If you touch her." Victor raised a hand. "Relax, Alex. I don't want to hurt her. I want her to open the chest. Isabella tied it to her bloodline. Only her daughter can unlock it." Lila's breath caught. She looked at the chest, then back at Victor. Alexander's voice cut through the tension. "Don't. He's twisting everything. That chest doesn't belong to him, it belongs to you. To us." Victor laughed. "To you? Don't make me laugh. Isabella trusted me, not you. You were her mistake. I was her choice." The word stabbed deep, but Alexander didn't flinch this time. Instead, he turned to Lila. His eyes, weary but resolute, locked onto hers. "You don't have to believe me," he said softly. "But believe this, whatever's in that chest, it was meant for you. Not for him. Not for me. For you." Lila's hands trembled as she stepped toward the pedestal. Her whole life had been leading to this moment. The unanswered questions, the empty spaces, the shadows of lies. She placed her palm on the lock. The chest clicked, then creaked open. Inside lay a stack of letters, photographs, and a small velvet box. Lila's fingers shook as she picked up the top letter. Her mother's handwriting danced across the page. "Lila, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. But you must know, your father never abandoned you. He stayed away because I begged him to. Victor was dangerous. I feared what he would do if he knew the truth. Alex loved you enough to let you hate him, because it was the only way to keep you safe. Tears blurred Lila's vision as the weight of the words sank in. She looked up at Alexander, her voice breaking. She loved you. She loved us. Victor's face twisted with rage. Lies, he roared, lunging toward the chest. But Alexander was faster. Years of pent-up fury exploded as he tackled Victor, sending both men crashing to the ground. The guards moved, but Lila, fueled by terror and newfound strength, snatched the velvet box and hurled it at them. It burst open, scattering papers and a necklace across the floor. "Stay back!" she shouted, surprising even herself. Alexander landed a brutal punch, pinning Victor against the cold concrete. His voice shook with fury. "You stole decades from me, from her, from us." Victor spat blood, sneering. "You were never man enough to keep her." But Alexander's grip only tightened. "No, I was man enough to let her go, to protect what mattered more than me. That's the difference between us." By the time the police sirens wailed outside, summoned by Lila's desperate call, Victor was restrained, his empire of threats crumbling. The guards fled, leaving him cornered and defeated. Lila knelt beside the scattered letters, clutching one close to her chest. She looked at Alexander, tears streaking her face but a fragile smile trembling at her lips. "She really did love you," she whispered. Alexander, bruised and bleeding, sank to his knees. His voice cracked, raw and unguarded. "And I've always loved you, more than you'll ever know." For the first time, Lila believed him. The vault had revealed more than secrets. It had revealed the truth. The kind of truth that shatters lies, heals wounds, and breaks chains. And in that truth, father and daughter finally found each other. The warehouse was silent now, save for the faint hum of the police radios outside. Victor had been dragged away, his threats echoing into nothing. The vault stood open, its secrets no longer locked in shadows. Alexander sat slumped against the cold wall, bruised and exhausted. Lila sat beside him, the diary clutched in her hands. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. She broke the silence. "All this time, I thought you abandoned me. I thought I wasn't wanted." Alexander's eyes glistened as he turned toward her. "Lila, you were never unwanted. You were my greatest regret, and my greatest hope. Every day I stayed away, I thought of you. Every choice I made with you in the back of my mind. I failed you by being silent, but I never stopped loving you." Tears rolled down her cheeks. For so long, she had carried the wound of not knowing, the ache of believing she was forgotten. Now, though the pain didn't vanish, it began to soften. She reached for his hand, hesitant, trembling, but real. And for the first time in decades, Alexander felt the weight of redemption. In the days that followed, the story made headlines. Victor Kale, disgraced financier, arrested in connection with fraud and racketeering. But the public would never know the real story, the love triangle, the diaries, the hidden vault. That truth belonged only to Alexander, Lila, and the memory of Isabella. Lila moved into a new apartment in Manhattan, one that Alexander insisted on securing for her. Not out of control, but out of care. He didn't want to smother her. He just wanted her safe. One evening, as they unpacked boxes together, Lila found the velvet box she had thrown during the confrontation. Inside, resting against the silk lining, was the necklace her mother had once worn. A small locket. She opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny photo. Isabella smiling with Alexander at her side. They were young, unguarded, happy. Lila pressed the locket to her chest. "She wanted me to have this," she whispered. Alexander nodded, his voice husky. "And she wanted you to know the truth." They stood in silence for a moment, the city glowing beyond the window. For the first time, the skyline didn't feel like a cold kingdom of glass and steel. Felt like home. Weeks later, Alexander did something no one ever expected. He stepped down from his company's board. He announced he was taking a year away from the empire he had spent a lifetime building. The world speculated, was it scandal? Fatigue? Something else? But only Alexander and Lila knew the truth. He wasn't stepping away from power. He was stepping toward family. On a quiet afternoon, they visited Isabella's grave together. The autumn wind carried the scent of leaves as they stood hand in hand. Lila laid the locket against the stone. "I forgive you, Mom," she whispered. "And I'm going to be okay now." Alexander placed his hand on the stone, his voice breaking. "We found her, Isabella, just like you wanted. She's stronger than both of us." Lila squeezed his hand, and for the first time in his life, Alexander Veron felt something greater than power: peace. As they walked away from the graveyard, the weight of the past no longer chained them. There were still wounds to heal, still years of absence to reconcile. But there was also hope. Hope for dinners shared. Hope for laughter returned. Hope for the love of a father and daughter finally restored. And for Alexander, the man who had once believed wealth could shield him from pain, the truth was simple at last. Money could buy many things, but it could never buy the moment his daughter finally called him Dad without hesitation. And that was worth more than every empire he had ever built. The waves of the Hudson sparkled in the distance as father and daughter walked side by side into a new chapter, one not built on lies or shadows, but on truth, forgiveness, and love. Do you believe forgiveness can truly heal broken families? Or do some wounds remain forever? Share your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.